60 Minutes Rewind.
Here's how to cause a fuss at a gathering of American judges or lawyers or just thoughtful people. Merely say the name Roy Cohn. People will leap at you with allegations against the man going back to his association with Joe McCarthy. Some sheer invention, some true but unprovable, and a lot that's true and proven. Among the current allegations, that it was Roy Cohn who started the rumor that Hamilton Jordan used cocaine at the Studio 54 disco. He denies he started it. That Cohn is the secret beneficiary of a number of dubious cash-only businesses. Cohn denies it. You will get very few people to praise or even defend Roy Cohn. Many, if not most, regard him as something of a snake. Let's take a look.
The committee will come to order.
The Roy Cohn of 1954, the arrogant young man always at Joe McCarthy's ear. McCarthy was impressed by Cohn's work in helping to send the Rosenbergs to the electric chair on the charge of spying for Russia. Roy Cohn, one of the authors of McCarthyism.
One thing I've always admired Senator McCarthy for was the fact that he was one of the few people I've ever run across in Washington who had guts, and the guts to stand up for what he believed in, and didn't care about the gentlemanly fellow senator rules and all of that hogwash. He cared about this country. I cared about this country.
When McCarthy and McCarthyism died, a lot of people thought it spelled the end of Roy Cohn, the brash New York lawyer, destroyer of reputations, whose venom had no limit, was washed up, finished. Not so. Today, the rich and the powerful and famous seek him out for the biggest of big money lawsuits. Benson Ford, for example, who is suing his uncle Henry for scores of millions.
I hired Roy Cohn because he is a tough son of a bitch.
If I can compare this with a Western, it's like bringing in a hired gun.
That's right. Because it seems like in Michigan, which seems to be Henry Ford's town, his word is very strong and his image is very popular back there. And I wanted to get a good street fighter in there to take away that image and break it down and clean it up a little bit.
It isn't a gentleman's fight, is it?
It ain't gonna be a gentleman's fight, Morley, not this one.
Don't mess with Roy Cohn has become a motto Roy wears with pride. The man who wrote the Esquire cover story, Ken Auletta, is a reporter who regularly measures Roy Cohn's impact on politics, business, and the law.
People come to him because, as I called him in that piece, they think of him as a legal executioner. A husband or a wife goes to Roy because they want to kill, all legal, their mate. Or a business partner, or former business partner, goes to Roy because they want to get back at a former associate. Or Benson Ford goes to Roy because he wants to get back at his uncle. And it's all legal.
I want to be prepared to the teeth. If I have a witness on a stand for an adversary, I want to know everything about that witness from the year one, every application he filed for a driver's license, to show inconsistencies, to show tendencies which demonstrate lack of credibility, and I want to be armed to the teeth. I don't go for this theory that my magnetic personality or my toughness is going to win over a jury or a judge.
He believes that it's war, and that outside of his small circle of friends, he inhabits the jungle. And all of these forces out there, be they the federal government or the U.S. Attorney's Office or journalists or others, are out to get him.
One man who was out to get him was another young, some might say arrogant lawyer attracted to Joe McCarthy, Robert Kennedy. Roy and Bobby served the senator loyally, but neither man could bear the presence of the other.
I don't know why Bobby and I never hit it off together. There could have been, one reason could have been, he wanted the job of chief counsel, which I got.
But the vendetta continued.
Well, there's no question about it. I think the authority for that, Morley, is one of his assistants, a man named Irving Younger, now a law professor at Cornell, wrote an article for commentary a couple of years ago.
Admitting it.
Oh, yes. He had been called in by the United States Attorney in the presence of Attorney General Kennedy and said the Justice Department wants to get Roy Cohn. It's your job to get him and report to us. And
why?
He didn't like me.
You cannot hurt Roy Cohn. He's just invulnerable, because he recognizes that the more publicity he gets, no matter what the publicity is, he benefits.
I would do anything that is legally permissible to do to get my client to win. Yes, I would. That's my job. There isn't anything I would not do because I believe there's only one answer in an adversary profession like law, and that is winning.
It's that attitude that brings in the clients.
If we make what I feel is a reasonable work out of everything, okay. If we don't make a reasonable work out of everything, I fight all the way.
You fight all the way, but I leave everything in your hands because you know what the article says. You never mess with Roy Cohn.
As long as a few people believe it.
If you hang out in Cohn's office, you get a taste of the kind of clients he gets and the reason they come to him. A lady who feels she got the wrong end of a business deal. Benson Ford and his millions, and this grandfatherly man.
Sit down.
I'm gonna leave in the morning. I'm going to the country.
Good. What are you going to do when you get to the country?
Well, I mean, I planted peppers last week, now I'm gonna plant tomatoes.
His name is Carmine Galante, the late Carmine Galante, who the papers said was the godfather of the mafia.
You think that had an influence on the federal judge when he held that you were right and the parole commission was wrong?
I think so.
He thinks a farmer ought to be able to see, right?
I think so. I mean, it's very well known that that's what I do.
A few months after this meeting, he was gunned down as he sipped a glass of wine. And to law students who object to Cohn's defense of underworld clients, he offers no apologies.
I don't have to believe a person is innocent, like we keep talking about Galante or Tony Salerno or something like that. I don't have to believe in their innocence in a particular case. I have to believe one of two things. Number one, that that person is innocent in the particular case, or that there are some extraordinary circumstances which make the prosecution unfair.
Roy Cohn's had his own troubles with the law. He's been tried 3 times on criminal charges that could have put him away for years. But he was acquitted each time. That's helped his reputation that if you're in trouble, get Roy Cohn. The client is an Italian countess. She gets the royal treatment at a smart New York restaurant and a ride in Cohn's Rolls Royce. The lunch is a business deduction, and so is the rolls.
It's interesting and ironic because that is the criticism he makes of Henry Ford, that Henry Ford is using corporate funds for his personal use. What Roy does, he lives off an expense allowance estimated between $300,000 and $400,000 a year, all of it charged to the business on the theory that he is conducting business all the time. I think that's very questionable.
Roy Cohn manages to spend, I guess, $500,000 a year as expenses without paying a penny of tax on it.
When we talk expenses, now that isn't so. First of all, I have paid an astronomical amount of taxes. I guarantee you I have paid more taxes than any of the last 3 presidents of the United States added up together. I probably hold the world's record of never having had a completed audit by Internal Revenue Service for over 20 years. I'm supposed to remember now, in 1979, who I had dinner with in February 1958. I very frankly don't want to earn any more than I have to earn to subsist the way I want to subsist, because I don't like the way this country punishes the workers, the middle class, the blue-collar people, the white-collar people, middle America. I think it's lousy.
There are people who think that Roy Cohn's takeovers are lousy. They say there's a pattern in which Cohn takes on a client and then somehow ends up as the beneficiary of that client's business assets.
As far as businesses are concerned now, I'll tell you one thing. I have no interest in business of any kind. I don't have an interest in any businesses. I'm interested in practicing law. I don't want assets. I don't have a family. I don't need assets.
For a man without assets, Roy lives quite well in a grand New York townhouse whose ownership is unclear, a house that also houses his law firm, a law firm in which he is not even named as a partner, all of which may be helpful in getting around certain tax obligations. Despite Cohn's reputation as being invincible, he has lost a number of cases. It's just that he always makes them sound like victories.
He recognizes that if you are tenacious, if you are a killer, if you are willing to go to any length to make your point or appeal your case, most people are going to back off.
In the musical Pal Joey, the song goes, "A canopy bed has lots of class." and so does a ceiling made of glass. Cohn has them both in his ornate bedroom, which is also a kind of recreation room and office and gallery for his collection of frogs. Stuffed frogs, china frogs, and toy soldiers. He admits to a certain vanity, religious about doing his 200 sit-ups every day. All this while dictating to his male secretary, Vincent Millard.
Did you remember I had a lunch date with Barbara Walters?
When is that?
Today.
Cohn maintains a permanent, expensive tan. In the harsh months, he somehow finds a business reason to head for Acapulco or Hawaii. He's a familiar figure in the best restaurants and tailors and barber shops, and regularly gets the works in places like the Beverly Hills Hotel. He is a sybarite who manages to take his pleasures with at least one ear tuned to business.
Somebody have a pencil?
Cohn has no small talk. He'll tell you unrepeatable gossip about his enemies, and he will praise his friends. The rest is just business.
The story will continue after this.
It is always business when he visits Studio 54, that over-publicized disco parlor in New York. Here gather the hip and the old and the odd. Any night, it is the mob scene from a Fellini movie. Cohn may look and feel uncomfortable in this goofy setting, but he goes. Lately, he goes because the owners of the place are his clients, and they've pleaded guilty to income tax evasion. Federal authorities say they've skimmed millions in cash from the place. They'll be sentenced next month. Cohn also goes because he likes to be seen with this week's jet set. Once in a while, he'll escort a model, but New York's matchmakers have given up on it. He's just not the marrying kind. Though at one time he says he and Barbara Walters almost got married. Barbara won't comment except to praise Roy for his loyalty.
We're getting married when we're both 60. Although I must say, in fairness to her, she disagrees with me politically like about 100%, because she's far more liberal than I am in practically every area.
Why haven't you gotten married?
I always felt that being a controversial person and being a person that people are always going to be fighting about and over and always destined to be always in some kind of battle or other, that I could go through it better if all I had to worry about was myself, not a wife and kids who were going to have part of the heartache pushed over on them.
Roy Cohn came to law with good connections. His father was a gentle-mannered New York State judge, and young Roy met all the right people.
When I went down as chief counsel for the McCarthy committee, I totally broke with my own background, with my own past. In other words, here I was, a young Jewish Democrat from New York, supposedly the most liberal, or one of the most liberal cities in the United States, going down to become chief counsel for a fellow like Joe McCarthy.
To what extent was Roy Cohn, the Jewish lawyer from New York, gonna out to prove that he was as good an American as any Irish Catholic or WASP lawyer?
I buy your thought, and I think there is something to it, but the script was a little bit different than that. I did resent very much the idea of associating Jews with a sympathy toward communism. And I do admit the fact that this is something that has always bothered me, and I've tried in every way I can to make it clear that the fact my name is Cohn and the fact that my religion has nothing to do except perfect compatibility with my love for America and my dislike for communism.
In the mosaic of New York politics, Roy Cohn is all things to all men. This registered Democrat feels perfectly at home at the East Side Conservative Club. He drifts through a crowd of well-wishers who might fear him or admire him, or might feel that one day they'll need him. It's hard to say how much political influence he has, but a lot of people believe he has it, and that can be enough. It's all very New York. The Irish bagpipes of the very Irish New York City detective band serenade the Jewish lawyer and his good buddy, the Cardinal's representative.
But how did this man bounce back and become so respectable? Roy, oddly enough, benefited from a kind of an innocence by association. He developed, and throughout his boyhood, he had close friends. And he went to their parties all the time. And people would see Roy, this pariah in the corner, and others would, Ed Weisel, Cyrus Vance, others would be talking to him. So they came to feel, well, he can't be that bad.
I don't think it was a question of pulling anything off. I've tried to give loyalty and I've tried to give friendship, and I find in life, when you extend friendship and you extend loyalty, you get it back.
We've seen Roy Cohn twice. What have we seen? A person of great charm, intellect, misstatement, accomplishment, and hypocrisy.
Do not be deceived. Regard this as a friendly introduction of Cohn at New York Law School. Professor Bob Blecker prepares his students for a series of Roy Cohn lectures.
Mr. Cohn is a person who thinks very little of truth, but much of genuineness. He's a master of deception, and yet a detester of ceremony. A nice guy who's done and does some lousy things. A protector, a paladin, a friend in court of organized crime.
Roy Cohn is not an enigma. He's simply a man who is seen differently by different people. If you engaged in amateur analysis, you might say that Roy Cohn was the kid on the block that all the bullies beat up on. And so when Roy Marcus Cohn was growing up, he was determined to get rich and get even. And he has.